Hello, I'm Oliver Colling, and this is my 70s TV childhood. Hello, and a very warm welcome to my 70s TV childhood. We are a podcast which is dedicated to remembering what it was like to grow up in Britain during the 1970s, and the key part that television played in our and our families' lives back then. In a time when, for those of us born in the 60s and early 70s, the most important choice of the week was whether to watch Scooby-Doo or play outside or something like that, TV was a big part of our daily routine. There wasn't much of it, and not all of it was great, I have to say, but it was something which bound us together and provided a focal point for families to get together for a shared experience in a way which nothing has since. Remember, television watching was a bit precarious in those days, so no catch-up, no streaming, and virtually no video recording. So if you wanted to watch something on television, you had to be there at the moment it was broadcast, otherwise you missed it, and potentially you would never see that programme ever again. Now, this may sound a bit grim to some of our younger listeners, or to those in countries like the US who already had multi-channel TV and a wealth of choice of watching, even in the 1970s. Well, we didn't. But what we did watch has lived with many of us well into our adult lives. As always, thank you to those of you who've been in touch with us. As I often say, the level of engagement we have with our listeners is truly staggering. So many of you have been in touch since we launched the podcast in 2020, and it's often the very small things which we've mentioned which have reawakened forgotten memories of happy times spent with family watching television. And for that, and for you sharing those memories, I am truly grateful. If you have any memories you'd like to share or comments on the podcast, you can get in touch in a number of ways. You can leave a comment on our blog at www.my70stvchildhood.com. Engage with one of our many social media sites on Facebook, Twitter/X, LinkedIn, or on YouTube. Or you can drop me an email to oliver@my70stvchildhood.com. We would love to hear from you. In fact, I think we might dedicate some time in a future episode to playing back some of your comments at greater length. You've said so many nice things over the last few years. It'd be good to just recap on some of those. Let me think about how we might do that. We've had lots of comments about our Christmas episode on Morecambe and Wise, and also our last episode on Bruce Forsyth's Generation Game. And whilst you have mostly been positive, a number of you have pointed out that I seem to have been displaying some bias. And I think you are making a fair point. Despite my going on several diversity awareness courses provided by the HR team here at My 70s TV Childhood Towers, I have been guilty of showing enormous bias towards the BBC and against ITV, particularly around Saturday night's outputs. I can only apologise, and I do promise that I will pay attention to what was on the other side very soon. My vast team of researchers are, as I speak, watching old recordings of New Faces, 321 and Logan's Run to prepare for a forthcoming episode about the other side. I suppose it's driven by what your family did, and whilst our family wasn't one of those where a parent or a grandparent objected to anything that was shown on the commercial channel, we probably did watch a bit more at BBC than ITV, especially on a Saturday evening. Watch this space for more on this subject. Now, turning to another recent debate I've had with some listeners via social media, we've spoken a lot about sitcoms over the 140-odd episodes of the podcast to date, and in one recent episode I mentioned that I have no memories of watching Till Death Us Do Part as a child, despite my parents letting me watch more or less anything I wanted to. My parents are no longer with us, so I can't ask them whether there was a reason for it or not, but I suspect that they, liberal as they were, thought the show was probably a bit too controversial for a small child. I don't know, but I have watched the programme as an adult, and I can see how clever it was in many ways, in highlighting the way that families work, and also the clever way that Johnny Spate, and of course the brilliant Warren Mitchell, caricatured the views of the crass and bigoted Alf Garnett to represent some of the popular feelings of the time on issues like feminism and attitudes to race and immigration. I think the main problem was that the caricature character became popular in its own right, and that sort of defeated the intended satire of the situation, which was, I have to say, very cleverly constructed.
Where's my bloody pipe, Paul? I mean, you long for this, one of your socialists, isn't it? It's your darling Harold made him a bloody lord, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know, and he's doing a good job too, and all. Well, he's sorting out the good porn from the bad porn, isn't he?
Eh?
Him and Mary.
You great, hairy, filthy scarskin. Listen, that woman, that Mary Whitehouse is concerned for the moral fibres and the well-being of this beloved country. Well, never mind about it's being rotted away by your corrupt films and your telly, and your bloody BBC's the worst of the lot, with the top of the pops of the evil painted youths dressed up like girls, and that middle-aged peroxide albino clunk click punch they got in charge of it there.
Nevertheless, the show was a huge hit, and I do remember the follow-up in Sickness and in Health in the 90s, which dealt in a searing way with the issues of ageing, bereavement and loneliness, amongst others, in a funny but very moving way. But back to the original Till Death Us Do Part. The show was so popular that it attracted global attention, and ultimately Johnny Spade went to Hollywood, and the show was developed for US TV, becoming the show All in the Family, which became a much-loved national institution, and the central character, Archie Bunker, became America's favourite bigot, and his constant fallings out with his family became a window on US family life. For the first time on US TV, an average white middle-aged man was let loose to air all of his prejudices in controversial areas, and it was, like Alf Garnett, extremely popular, particularly as Archie often got his comeuppance and came off second best.
Edith, where's my dance for all I do, huh? Paying for the food, the clothes, the taxes, the household utilities, huh? All day long on a job, working my butt off.
Yeah, what about me? I'm here all day working my butt off.
Oh, my God. Your mother was here to hear that coming out of your mouth. I'm glad she died, Edith. That killed everything you said up to that point. And now the argument is definitely over.
No, it ain't over.
It is
No,
over.
it ain't over. Now, I ain't leaving here tomorrow till after that wedding, and neither are you.
What?
No, them people is dependent on us, and I'm dependent on you. And if you walk out on me tomorrow, you can keep on walking. Now the argument is over.
All in the Family and the sequel Archie Bunker's Place, where Archie became the owner of a bar, are much-loved US TV classics, but didn't form part of my 70s TV childhood as they were not widely shown in the UK. So why do I mention them now? Well, there is a connection to a show which, although not universally remembered, I enjoyed watching as a child. It used to be shown on Granada, my ITV region, note, talking about an ITV programme, in a slot either before or after the early evening national and local news. It was a show which grabbed my attention for a number of reasons. Firstly, it was actually funny, and secondly, it dealt with family life in an ordinary American family, which, to me, as a child living in the northwest of England, was actually quite extraordinary, and nothing like the sort of family life that I or any of my friends had.
Little thing goes wrong, Mom starts to sing this familiar song.
Wait till your father gets, until your father gets, wait till your father gets home.
Dad's not so bad and he seldom gets mad.
And we aren't about to desert him. Kids today like to have their own way, and what Daddy doesn't know won't hurt him. I think my mom's just swell.
then she starts to yell.
Every time we have a fuss, just wait till your father gets, wait till your father gets home. See what I mean? Wait till your father gets home. We know.
Wait Till Your Father Gets Home was a Hanna-Barbera cartoon based on All in the Family, and was the first primetime cartoon shown in the US since the Flintstones in the early 60s. The show ran from 1972 to 1974, and it was Hanna-Barbera's first animated sitcom, which was really aimed at adults rather than children, but attracted the whole family, and in many ways it was a precursor to shows like The Simpsons and, more latterly, Family Guy. It focused on the Boyle family. Harry, the conservative dad, voiced by Tom Bosley, later to be Mr. Cunningham in Happy Days. Irma, the loving but occasionally exasperated mum, and their three kids, Chet, who was a laid-back hippie, Alice, a feminist ahead of her time, and Jamie, who was much younger, a sort of typical cheeky youngest child. The show poked fun at the generational and cultural clashes of the era. Harry was a hard-working, middle-class man, and he was caught in the middle of the counterculture movement, feminism, and a rapidly changing society. Sounds familiar? Well, exactly. If you think about it, Harry was basically an animated version of middle-class dads across the Western world at the time. And you can bet that plenty of dads and families watching on UK TV could relate to him too, even though the show was set in suburban America. I suppose to really understand where Wait Till Your Father Gets Home came from, we need to just think about the cultural backdrop. In the US, the early 70s were all about post-Vietnam disillusionment, the counterculture movement, and a rising wave of social change. Here in the UK, it was a bit different, but no less chaotic. We were dealing with strikes, economic struggles, and generational divides of our own. You can imagine families watching this and thinking, crikey, this could be us. Well, when I say that, it could be us apart from the fact that everyone lived in big houses on the show. The teenage kids had cars and motorbikes and used to hang out at the Mall, whatever that was, something which was absolutely impossible in 1970s Warrington. The show did often tackle serious contemporary issues head-on, using humour to highlight topics like consumerism, the free love movement, and the rise of suburban paranoia, something I particularly remember from the show, which was personified in Ralph, Harry's ultra-paranoid right-wing neighbour, who was always convinced there were communists around every corner. He was always telling Harry that the commies were listening, or that sleeping agents were everywhere waiting to spring to life to take over America. Ralph's fearmonger feels especially strange today, but back then, I think it reflected real Cold War anxieties felt by many, both in American and European society. And it is fascinating to see how those fears were taken up and turned into comedy through Ralph.
Before you know it, we break up the whole California commie ring.
You know something, Ralph? I don't know what this country would do without you.
Oh, hey, look. I don't want no medals, no monuments. All I ask is when I go, they bury me in Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors.
Ralph, I don't know how to tell you this, but I really don't think you'll make Arlington. That's very liberal of you.
Would you mind not calling me that? I get at least a dozen pieces of obscene mail every day.
That's funny. I never get any.
You don't subscribe.
And you do?
Of course, part of my duty. That's the first rule in countermeasures. Know your enemy.
You should get a Freedom Medal for eye strains. Oh, Ralph, you're a regular Abe Lincoln.
Let's say you deliver a case of beans, right? Am I right? And one of the cans just happens to wind up overseas, and pow! It's booby trap. A cute little device put there by a minority truck driver who is obviously working for the other side.
You know what, Ralph? I think your brain is booby trapped.
Wait Till Your Father Gets Home never quite reached the UK mainstream the way that certain other shows like The Flintstones or Scooby-Doo did. But if you're a fan of sitcoms from the 70s, you will notice some familiar themes. We mentioned Till Death Us Do Part, and in many ways, Alf Garnett's grumbling about the younger generation and social change isn't all that different from Harry Boyle's. And Harry's exasperation with his family's progressive ideals does actually remind me of characters like Rigsby in Rising Damp. That sort of man out of time feeling. Which, I think I seem to be experiencing a bit more the older I get. Perhaps it's just age. So why should we care about Wait Till Your Father Gets Home? Well, for starters, it was ahead of its time. It did show that animation could tackle real-world issues in a way that was both funny and meaningful. And without it, as mentioned, we might not have had shows like The Simpsons, which, to be honest, used a very similar formula, a family sitcom, generational tension, and heavy amounts of satire to change television forever. Looking back, it's a snapshot of its era. Watching it now is like opening a time capsule, I would have thought, filled with hopes, fears and absurdities of the early 70s. And, let's be honest, Harry's struggles with his kids feel oddly modern. Whether it's debates about technology, social values, or just trying to keep up with the times and keep up with the neighbours, his frustrations are relatable to all of us. Now, to be honest, I haven't watched this show since the late 1970s. And it may be that if I did, it might not have aged well, and I might not find it as engaging as I did as a child. But it was different. It was cleverly written, and it was yet another example of television providing a window for me onto a world of which I knew nothing, i.e. ordinary life in small-town America. It only ran for 48 episodes, but it does feel a bit like a gem in 70s TV history. I think I'm inspired now. I think I might see if I can find it and watch it again. What do you think? Or should you wait till your father gets home? Do you remember Wait Till Your Father Gets Home? And did you like it, or perhaps you hated it? Whichever, let us know via our blog, social media, or by dropping an email to oliver@my70stvchildhood.com. That's all we have time for now. So join us again next week for the next edition of our 70s TV related quiz, and in a fortnight for the next of our regular podcasts. In the meantime, please like, rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts, and join us again soon for more from My 70s TV Childhood.